things that I really struggled with all this time is shame. Shame of who I am, loss of identity. I didn't know who I was when I got out of there. I was ashamed of being a native, and even bringing up my children, I would tell them we have to keep the yard clean, have the lawn mowed, raked, and everything, because they're going to say these dirty old Indians live here. And meanwhile, they'd say it anyway.
And then he got to drink the water. And if he got caught, and he saw some boys throw it when they get caught, was drinking water. And punishment they were given, caught with oil in the car. They would make you drink them until it would make you sick.
Why? Can I go home, and why I said, why? I said, we go to jail. We can't keep your children at home. He said, you got to stay here.
So many committed suicide when they came out of that school. And a lot of us turned to alcohol to forget and died from it.
When it was brought in, I was starting to feel weary and worried and scared. All those three combination of emotions. Then we were told we're going to be electrocuted. And I said, I wonder what that means. What electric shock.
Yes. And there were babies found in those walls.
Why were there babies in the wall?
Well, it would have been scandalous for the school had anyone found out about it.
When we are children in the United States, sitting on little rug squares on sunny afternoons, or at dinner with our parents, or perhaps even just flipping on the TV, we are bombarded with information about the government. They're there to protect you, people will say, because that's what they were taught. They fix the roads and set up schools and keep us safe from criminals and protect us from other countries and so many more things. That sounds pretty good when you're a kid. But sooner or later, especially when you're a minority, this vision is likely going to be shattered. The blind trust is going to fall apart, and you will see just how much selfishness and hatred goes on up there with no regulation. And when the hatred and demonization goes unchecked, and the government begins to make up their minds and categorize who is good and who is bad for the nation, we get democide, the mass murder of civilians by the government, which is very, very difficult to stop until there is nothing else to kill, and they find something else to attack. I'm Vanderhyde, and today we're going to discuss Democide and Ethnostates, the destruction of minorities at the hands of the government. Humanity really has the nasty habit of mass murder, even in literature. The manga series Tokyo Ghoul by Sui Ishida is all about democide. In this society, creatures called ghouls are targeted by the CCG, the Commission of Counter-Ghoul, with the goal of eradicating the species entirely. The main character, Ken Kaneki, doesn't care about this democide until he becomes a ghoul after a tragic accident and medical experimentation. The government funds these officers, nicknamed Doves, to murder ghouls, and countless individuals are murdered throughout the series, including the parents of a young girl in front of her. The ruthlessness is not entirely unwarranted, as the ghouls survive off of human flesh, so it's not meant to be a perfect analogy of modern-day democide. But the ruthless, unfiltered murder by the government of a minority group is a huge part of the series. Today, we see evidence of democide all the time, and the government goes to great lengths to cover them up. Fairly recently, the bodies of 215 children were found buried at the Kamloops Indian Residential School in British Columbia. There exist still 150 residential schools in Canada, some of them only closing as recently as the 90s, and the families of children who died or disappeared at these quote-unquote re-education facilities are still desperately trying to get permission from the government to dig at these sites, and yet the government remains reluctant. Meanwhile, currently in northwestern Asia, a Turkic ethnic group of Muslims called the Uyghurs are being targeted by the Chinese government and being forced to give up religion, attend re-education camps, and become forced laborers, which are then sold to dozens of major corporations and companies, such as Adidas, BMW, Abercrombie & Fitch, Nike, Gap, Jaguar, H&M, Skechers, Volkswagen, Mercedes-Benz, Puma, Victoria's Secret, Calvin Klein, Apple, Amazon, and Samsung, to name some of the more well-known. Today, we learn about the horrible events of ethnic cleansing by example of the Holocaust and the Trail of Tears. We listen to the stories of torture and the terrible abuses of these people that we put in bondage, while completely ignoring the evidence of our government's foul play with things like ICE facilities. Time and time again, we see politicians and news anchors and even our neighbors speak about how these people are deserving, justifying the horrible treatment going on in our own cities to immigrants and minorities. But is that not what the people of Germany were doing as their Jewish neighbors were being gassed to death? Listening to government propaganda and finding reason to justify the horrors, turning away until there was nowhere left to look but at the truth. Fiction is a good way of creating situations so as to explore how people might react to them, so that we can learn more about the world without actually having to experience these situations. But the situations portrayed in series like Tokyo Ghoul aren't completely fictional. Of course, assuming you look past the supernatural aspect of it, in that it's incredibly easy to ignore the war crimes and atrocities our government commits, as long as we aren't the ones they're trying to crush like ants under a nuclear powerhouse of a boot. There is a poem written about this that I would like to share with you, called First They Came by Martin Niemöller.
In Germany, they came first for the communists, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a communist. Then they came for the Jews, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a Jew. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a trade unionist. Then they came for the Catholics, and I didn't speak up because I was a Protestant. Then they came for me, and by that time, nobody was left to speak up.
And so, I think it's important to remember that trying to keep China from hosting the Olympics as a slap on the wrist for genocide doesn't cut it. We need to boycott, protest, and get loud when we see things that aren't right. Or else, how can we keep ourselves from joining the list of people the government has murdered to achieve some horrible ethnostate? This has been Vanderhyde, and I hope you found this podcast on ethnostates and democide to be insightful. Signing off.